Have you ever put together an IKEA dresser? Have you ever hyperventilated contemplating putting together an IKEA dresser? Then you can imagine the beginning of this story where we thought the summer after COVID that it would be a great plan in children and family ministry to build 10 of them with fourth and fifth graders who hadn't been in a classroom for a year. And so in the blur of getting back to normal, we thought with this mini VBS plans, we could build dressers with these young teams and send them out to our neighbors who we try to love in Charlotte. So we planned the event. We purchased the dressers, we looked at the instructions, and then we panicked. Have you ever heard the line from the musical, "I'm calm, I'm perfectly calm, hysteria!" In that panic, we thought, who should we call for help? And so we thought of our great Boy Scout troops here. And we reached out thinking surely an Eagle Scout could help us. They know how to use tools. They know how to read instructions. And so we contacted the Scout leaders, and one of them said, "We know just the right young man to send." On the morning of the event, we unpacked the boxes of dressers, we welcomed the fourth and fifth graders, and we waited for our fearless Boy Scout with his tools to arrive. When his dad dropped him off, and when we all looked again at the dressers and the restless fourth and fifth graders and our anxious team, I think we all took a collective gulp. Would it be hysteria? Is this even possible? The answer is, it was. We watched this young man take his place in front of our eager faces and the crazy pile of unmade dressers, and we quickly learned this young man was up to the impossible task. Amid the scene where we felt unable, his matter-of-factness amid the crazy mess of parts and his maturing leadership gave our team agency we didn't realize we had. By the end of the morning, 10 well-made dressers later that we felt proud sharing with our neighbors in Charlotte, he left to a standing ovation from all of our adults and our kids. Scouts, your leadership matters, and when you show up to a mess in our world, what you do offers hope and offers leadership. Sometimes we don't know what to make amid the apocalyptic mess of crazy parts in literature, right? This is crazy, this text. We don't know how to assemble the meaning of these parts in Daniel. We look for codes, we look for breakthroughs, and we think, surely if I just turn it this way, it'll all make sense. It will come together. And yet we can't help but feel like we have a screw loose when we read of the lion with the eagle's wings or the leopard with the four wings of a bird. And you can see the artistic interpretations of these on the cover of the bulletin. What are we to make of these distorted beasts? As you look at the cover of your bulletin, I'll tell you just a fun moment that happens in our worship planning on Tuesdays. Joe loves artwork, and he's so gifted at finding just the right picture and painting, and there's always good theology behind these images. And it took a while to land on this one. The four beasts in the four corners. What I want to put before you this morning is, what if the point of apocalyptic literature is not to see the crazy distortions in the text, but to better recognize the crazy in our own cultural contexts? These distorted beasts might help us clearly see the distortions in the world around us. The apocalyptic vision comes alongside those distortions to help us nurture a theological vision of how to respond. 2 weekends ago, I was in Pittsburgh to celebrate my dad's 75th birthday. We had a wonderful, wonderful time. He was asking about all of you at Myers Park, and I shared with him the upcoming centennial, the work on the history book, the discussion regarding what makes this church tick and what are the origin stories of this congregation. He wanted to know what stories shape the life here and the ministry and commitments of our congregation. And I had great joy telling him about all of you and our work together. My father is a Presbyterian pastor as well. He served 3 new church developments across the South, and then at the end of his ministry served almost 20 years at Fox Chapel Presbyterian north of Pittsburgh, a church much like ours. And he shared an important origin story of that church's history. He said that in 1984, the steel industry collapsed in Pittsburgh. And the steel workers, angry and scared for themselves and for their families, stood in silent vigils outside of Pittsburgh's wealthiest churches for weeks on end. Can you imagine? They wanted to garner the attention of steel and banking executives who they believed were responsible for the destruction of the steel industry. During that time, 150,000 plus steel workers lost their jobs in the Pittsburgh region, reducing Pittsburgh's steelmaking capacity by over 75%. All of a sudden, there was distortions in the world around them. When the silent vigils did not capture their attention, they began disrupting church services, but to no avail. Finally, frustrated and fearful on Mother's Day, they turned to a new plan, and it sounds absolutely crazy. They gathered up buckets of dead fish from the 3 rivers of Pittsburgh outside of local churches while congregants gathered for worship. When services were done, church members were greeted by the stench and the sight of hundreds of dead fish. If you've walked along this hallway upstairs, you might see a few fish around here. Fishes are a symbol of the early Christian church. They were a place for safe sanctuaries. Outside of the communications office, there's one that's just a little echo from this summer where we dove deep into friendship with God and had a whole fish theme, and we made duct tape fishes on the carpet, and there's one where you can just barely see it. It's a reminder of joy and of Christian sanctuary. But for the steel workers who were reeling with despair, it was anything but. They were asking a fair and faithful question amid the distortions of the world around them. Where was the compassion of Christ? They were asking for theological vision. The way this connects back to Fox Chapel is that John Galloway was the senior pastor at the time, and of all the churches around town, he was the one who said, "Come and talk to me. Come to my office." And he gave them voice and respect and care, and he said, "How can we support you? How can we support your families?" Tearfully, they explained to him what they needed most was to provide medical insurance for their families. You can imagine, in typical Presbyterian fashion, they formed a committee, and gathered up folks from the greater community, including Mr. Fred Rogers, who was the honorary chairman. What happened through the work of that committee and the commitment of many across Pittsburgh led to the development of the Caring Program for Children, a plan that worked with Blue Cross Blue Shield to ensure the children of the steelworkers. And that program continues to this day. Now it's called CHIP, for Children's Health Insurance Program, and it insures over 9 million children a year. I just spoke to one of Caitlin's friends recently, and her family said this CHIP program is a saving grace for our family. Fox Chapel, in their leadership to look beyond the distortions to a theological vision, were able to show the compassion and the love of Jesus Christ. What I'd invite you to wonder and to pay attention to in our text today is that what happens in Daniel is not to be lost amid the craziness of these four beasts in the beginning. What emerges from these fantastical depictions and distortions is a vision of the Son of Man who arrives on the clouds and appears to the Ancient of Days. And it's a foreshadowing of the Christ to come. There's a shift in this passage that is so palpable and powerful from the distorted to the divine, from the inhumane to the fullest expression of humanity. On this Christ the King Sunday, the last Sunday in the liturgical year, we celebrate the reign of Jesus Christ, a completely different kind of king who reigns above all and in all. Even as we know, next Sunday we will begin again the Advent journey foretelling his birth to come. Today we know he reigns over all. It's the Alpha and the Omega, the Savior, the one who is the Son of Man. We hear in the New Testament that the Word will become flesh and dwell among us, full of grace and truth. And there's a moment in apocalyptic literature where that feels impossible, until the end of Daniel 7. And here Daniel makes hundreds of years before the author of John's Gospel makes this incredible affirmation. He makes a promise that this will come to pass. Daniel's author offers his own affirmation that amid what is most crazy, amid the great distortions of our world, that the one who is the Son of Man will appear to the Ancients of Days, and he will show up on the scene and reveal the depth and breadth and hope of the fullest expression of humanity. And this is good news. This is gospel news. Humanity will not be ensnared by the entrapments of this world. Humanity will not be distorted by these wildebeests. This human, he will have agency. He will help get the job done when we feel immobilized and petrified. This human will have vulnerability. He will show up to the tears and the suffering of the world. And this human will have an incredible capacity beyond all of ours for compassion and care. When catastrophic thinking immobilizes the ability to have self-agency, the one who is to come will have the capacity to act. When tears emerge from devastated steelworkers betraying their otherwise steely toughness, the one who is to come will show up with the vulnerability that shares their pain and takes away their shame. When the distortions of the world's mechanisms and the calculus toward greed cause suffering, the one who is to come will show up with the capacity to care. This is the double vision we see in Daniel. The distorted visions of our crazy world because of human sin and distortion are met with theological imagination. The ability to envision the arrival of Jesus Christ and the ability to take action on that vision, to do what is faithful and doable now, when we might otherwise feel stuck or confused. Daniel's vision is of a humble yet valiant Savior who appears on a cloud ready to intervene with all of his tools on behalf of humanity amid the impending catastrophe and craziness. This one intervenes on our behalf. He is capable and mobile, and he is the antithesis of chaos. On this Christ the King Sunday, we are reminded both of Christ's everlasting reign and of Christ's long-expected arrival. Now Advent is just a week away. I'm not sure what in this season your particular brand of crazy distortions might be, or what distortions in the world around you are keeping you awake at night with grief. I'm not sure if your chaos is political uncertainty, personal anger, pervasive grief, psychological anguish, or perpetual addiction. Maybe your brand of crazy is a pivotal moment of upheaval in your world or in ours. What I do know is this, that in those places, beneath what is crazy and distorted, there is pain and there is suffering. And I invite you just to take a deep breath and in the quiet of this moment, think of what that place might be for you. Lord, hear our prayers. At a church that I served in New Jersey many years ago, there was a young man named Andreas. And Andreas was a great voice in the choir. Andreas was the person in the youth group who demanded the best of our humanity, and he kept us from being crazy. He kept us centered on Christ. And each Advent, his was the voice that appeared on Christmas Eve night, marking the pivotal moment when we shifted from the crazy of the year to the coming of Jesus Christ. When he stood up in the chancel before he even took a breath, we could feel ourselves relax into an inexpressible hope. His was the solo that filled the sanctuary on Christmas Eve with the sound of promise that something different is possible in the distorted visions of the world. Amid the beasts, there will emerge the best of humanity. Amid the distortions, a different kind of king will reign. If it feels impossible to see or to believe, listen closely, and you will hear.